Hey guys, it's me, Ethan again. And since last time we talked, I joined Stars with Mia. And it turns out that Stars, they deal with all kinds of things worldwide. Like, it's not just shooting zombies. In fact, that is kind of like what my wife does. She's in ground recon, but I didn't want to be on the ground just shooting a gun. I wanted to do something else. So I decided to be an air reconnaissance. And what that basically is, I get to operate drones and organize air strikes and ground strikes. In fact, I think it's pretty cool. And in May of 2017, I started the process of getting hired on by Stars, and I had to fill out a bunch of paperwork, and they had to make sure I was physically fit. And then in June 2017, I went into basic training. And it takes place on the island of Ethalonia, and they basically train you in this big castle-like looking building. Although I can't tell you everything we did because, it's a lot. I mean, there's probably going to be some things that I forget, and we're going to be here all day if I tell you everything I did. So essentially, I walk into that castle, and then they say, "You Ethan Upshur? All right, come this way." And then they shave my head, and they took my clothes away, and they put me in star gym clothes. And they made me run every day, every morning. And then they taught me how to go through the obstacle course. And then they started teaching me how to fight, do some hand-to-hand combat. And then they taught me how to fight with a knife. And then a handgun. Then a shotgun. Then a rifle. And let me tell you, I do not envy snipers. I would not want to be a sniper. Although, yes, we do have snipers in Stars. I just would not want to do that. And they taught me how to rappel down a helicopter. But the scariest stuff was when they would wake us in the middle of the night and they would tell us to put on our tactical gear and then go out in the night to just walk. Like, to find whatever we could find at night. But after a few weeks of just doing the basic training, they taught me how to do air reconnaissance. And what that basically is, sometimes it's just controlling drones on a computer. But there was this one day that I got to go out with the Sea Stars out on the ocean and operate a submersible and pick up some rocks at the bottom of the ocean. That was kind of cool. But I probably am not going to be on the ocean that much. So, after about 3 months, I completed my training. In September of 2017, I became an E2, which basically meant I could start making some money because I was done with training. And I really liked the job at first because, while some other people were outside trying to shoot somebody or something, I was in the air-conditioned office operating a drone. So yeah, I kind of had it made. And I made just about as much money as everybody else. And in October of 2017, we had us a really nice Halloween party. And in November of 2017, me and Mia had a great time on Ethinian Independence Day. And we had a great Christmas together. And for Christmas, we actually went to go see Dylan and Jake. It was fun. But, you see, on January 2nd, we started going back to work, okay? And I started getting this weird feeling going back. And on January 8th, I had this horrible nightmare, and it's a reoccurring dream of mine. You see, I'm coming up on the 15-year anniversary of my best friend Jessica's death. Because you see, back in '03, I was at this Catholic middle school up in Maine, and I had two best friends, and their names were Lynn and Jessica. And you see, with Jessica, she hung herself, and I still don't really know what happened, and I don't think I ever will. And that has haunted me every day for the past 15 years. And now, since we're coming up on the anniversary of it, I can't believe it had been 15 years. And on January 8th, that night, I had a horrible nightmare. It was her screaming, and then I saw her hanging there, the way I found her. And then I woke up crying, and Mia, she held me for a little while, saying, "Ethan, what's wrong?" And I didn't feel like telling her, so I just said, "I had a bad dream is all." Okay. And on January 10th, I was in my office with my coworker, Leah, and then Captain Marks, the commanding officer of Air Recon at STARS, said, "All right, okay, there's something we need to investigate. A young 15-year-old girl was found on the side of the road in Arizona, barefoot and pregnant. You see, she had come from a strange village with a cult in it, and yeah, she's claiming sexual abuse. But the problem is, the cult, they live in a pretty remote area of the mountains of Arizona. So, we need you to get out the drones and go check it out. And we need to determine if there is some bad things going on in that village. And if there is, we need to land you on the ground so you can do an investigation." All right, okay. Now, we really needed some evidence before we could do an official ground investigation. And if we did find some bad stuff, well, we could easily authorize the authorities to arrest them. Or if we felt like they were too big of a risk, we could come in there and neutralize them. And I didn't want to do that then. So me and Leah did what we were supposed to do, and we contacted the drone that was flying over Arizona, because we have drones flying everywhere. And so we flew it over the coordinates of where she alleged it was. And what we discovered is, well, people that looked like they were stuck in the early 1900s. I mean, they had clothes and tools, but they only used radios. They didn't use, like, the TV for entertainment. And, well, we watched them for several hours, and, I mean, it was like they were stuck in the early 1900s, like they were kinda Amish. So, I don't know. Nothing was really that suspicious when we first got an aerial view, and then it was like the whole sky went white, and then like we lost signal with the drone, but we could still control it, but the drone couldn't get any footage back, so we flew it away so then it could get signal, and then the camera came back. And so we decided to fly back to that little village in the mountains of Arizona. And there was a strange voice over the loudspeaker system that they had. and it said to bring the children into the church. Okay, maybe there's some kind of kids party going on. And so we watched them take him into the church, and then we heard screaming. And we waited outside that church with the drone for over an hour, and we saw the adults come out, but not the kids. Okay, yep, we need to investigate this. And so I told Captain Marks what had happened, and he said, "Oh, Ethan, this looks like some bad news. You're going to need to have a helicopter pilot and a ground recon specialist to go with you." And I said, "Okay, let's bring Mia. We'll make a great team." And he said, "All right, okay, make sure to bring a handgun now." And then he said, "All right, okay, now you also are going to need a helicopter pilot so you can look around and then bail out of the helicopter and do your investigation." All right. And then the next day, January 11th, we started just planning all this. We organized us a flight on what's called a shooting star, which is basically our jets that we have, and they would fly us over to Arizona. Okay? And we made sure to pack, and they put us up in a hotel, and they had people for us to meet in Arizona, and a pilot was assigned to go with us. His name was Jim Jacobs. He kind of kept to himself, but he was very polite, and he had a bit of a sense of humor. And then on January 13th, we were off in the shooting star into Arizona. We landed at Phoenix International Airport, and another STARS agent from Arizona greeted us and put us in his big black SUV. And me and the driver got in his SUV, and we drove off. And then he drove us to a big cabin with a STARS helicopter parked in the back. And it was very late in the afternoon when we got there. So the guy said, "All right, take plenty of time to rest, because tomorrow night you're going into that village through a helicopter, and it's going to be an all-night thing." And then, as soon as we got into the cabin, we made contact with STARS High Command in Ethalonia. And then, well, we went to sleep. And that night I heard the old familiar voice. Please, Ethan, help me. Help me. Ethan! And I woke up again, had the same dream. And I had to cuddle Mia once again. And this time Mia said, "I really don't mind doing this every night for you, Ethan. But I don't think we're going to be able to keep doing this if we have a kid." Yeah, we had talked about having kids before. After all, we were married by that point. And we had talked about having kids. But we hadn't had sex in weeks. So, right now, kids were just off the table. But it was something that we were opening to doing one day. And then, the next morning, we had breakfast, and then we had us a briefing with another STARS agent on what exactly we were going to do. And we both called Dylan and Jake, explaining to them that we were about to do something very big and very important, and we hoped to see him when we got back. And then, in the late afternoon, after having us a big dinner, we took off. Whoa. And it was actually pretty cool being in that helicopter. It was a lot different. Jim Jacobs was a lot different than Mooch. He didn't really have many stories, but he could tell a good joke every now and again. And then I took out the camera, and it was my job to film it. And Jim called out saying, "All right, we're crossing into reservation territory now. All right, are we looking for some kind of factory or something?" And I said, "All right, we're looking for kind of like a big village." "All right, well, that's going to be hard to miss. And hey, we're flying kind of low to the ground, so we'll see it. And I'm just a little bit worried that we might, you know. And I said, "Oh, Jim, don't say that." "All right, okay," he said. And then I started filming, and then I think I saw it. I think I saw the town, and then that dreaded white light and the dreaded sound again. And then Jim horrifyingly screamed out, we lost signal. Fuck, I can't tell where we're going. Mayday, mayday. Mayday, mayday." And then he heard the voice over the radio, and it said, "Check, Jim, where are you? We can't see you." And then he said, "All right, so here are our coordinates. We're about 30 degrees west of the mountain, and we need to make an emergency landing. All right, we'll be making an emergency landing at, and I can't even remember the coordinates he called out, but we landed pretty quickly. And he got out a combat shotgun, and I took out my handgun, and Mia took out her rifle. And then we jumped out of the helicopter, and we thought, okay, all right, this land might be a little bit hostile towards us. So let's check it out. And, well, we landed at a patch of rocky soil, and right above us was a giant gray mountain that was littered in pine trees. It was right in front of us, and we were in this big canyon area. And then we started walking. We started walking through this rocky, wooded path until we saw what looked like a little windmill and a little house outside the village. And I took my camera to film what looked like the main church of the village that I could see in the distance. And then a squad of these villagers snuck up on us and said, "Liar, Father Elias, what are you doing here? You ascended from our earth, from the hell above. The Antichrist. You are the Antichrist." And I said, "No, we're here doing an investigation of your little village, because we have reason to believe that there's some suspicious activity." And then, bam! From behind Jim Jacobs, a rogue villager went behind him and slit his throat right open. And then two other villagers jumped on him and started pouncing. And they started stabbing him over and over again. And he couldn't get his voice out because his throat was slit. Oh, poor Pilot. And then Mia raised her gun and then shot at two of them. And then she was tackled as well. And then I grabbed out my gun. And then, bang! I was on the ground. And I was able to kick this big bald guy off of me, and then I was able to shoot him. And then I waved the gun at him, and then they dragged me. They dragged her across the rocky soil away from me. And then I tried to shoot at the guys that were dragging her, but one of the guys ran right in front of my bullet and then fell to the ground. And then I tried to chase him, and then I chased him right into what looked like the outskirts of the village. And then I was tackled again by a woman with a big machete. And then I had to kick her off me. And then, without any emotion, I shot her. But that was the last of my bullets. I still had another few cartridges in my pocket, but that was it. And then I saw two other, what appeared to be farmers, backing away from me. And then I lost sight of the guys that were carrying Mia. And I thought, not again. I have to save her from a bunch of hillbillies again?